Hi there, and welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of whiskey with the love of music. And with me tonight, as always, is my good friend Drew Crowley. Drew, how are you?
Good evening. I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
Doing really well. Doing really well. Went down and visited my dad this weekend, so just got back in town this afternoon and ready to do this show with our guests from Ironroot. But we also want to welcome our guest host for tonight, sitting in for Benjamin, is someone who was actually a guest not too long ago with us, and Shannon Hood. Shannon, uh, you don't look like you're at home.
I am not at home. I am in Colorado, Arvada, Colorado specifically.
Yeah. Are you ever at home?
Sometimes, when I need to wash clothes or
Well,
suitcases, something like that.
all right. Well, thank you for sitting in with us. I know we're going to have a good time with you as we're going through everything tonight. First, we want to take care of a few housekeeping things. We're going to introduce our guests after that. Uh, we are a part of the Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who have shows that are hopefully fun, hopefully things that people will enjoy listening to and uh, participating in. We have Distillers Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. Those shows release, I believe, every Thursday. And My Whiskey Den with Ben and Patrick and Mike. Those shows are live every Monday night at 9 o'clock. And Bourbon Turntable, that's us. Our shows release every Wednesday, and you can find us in a lot of different places that we'll tell you all about later. But first, we have a special announcement for you.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit that bell notification to find out when new episodes are coming out, which do come out every single Wednesday on all of the services: Spotify, Apple Music, Google, maybe Amazon, definitely YouTube. And always hit that like button, but hit it an odd number of times, so then that way it stays as a like.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate your talents as always. So tonight we have a couple of very special guests with us. We have Robert Likarish of Ironroot Republic, one of the co-founders, along with his brother Jonathan. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Surviving at this point.
Surviving at this point. Well, we'll try to make your survival go a little bit easier. And we have also with us Josh Golladay. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Love it. Looking forward to digging into some of the things that are going on in Ironroot and some of your whiskey, and then we're going to talk about music as well. So, to get things started, first of all, Ironroot is winning awards left and right. It's like Michael Jackson at the Grammys without the creepiness. So, first. Let me say congratulations, because it just seems like every time I see anything on social media, you guys have won something else. And, awards are what awards are in any industry. But if you're racking them up like you guys are, we know that there's a lot of legitimacy to it. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It definitely makes us feel good. So can't argue with that.
So what we're going to do, at least Drew and I don't think Shannon necessarily has the samples, is we're going to pour a sample of the Ironroot Harbinger, and that's it, in the classic bottle. I honest to full disclosure, every time I get a bottle, I pour it into to my old bottle, just because I like that bottle better. I use it, like the same thing I do with Kentucky Spirit and the tail feather bottle. So, but I want to set this up just a little bit, and then Robert, I'll hand this off to you. I believe it was Christmas dinner 2011 at the Likarish household, and you were just finishing up law school, and you made a surprising announcement to your family. And take over the story from there, assuming that I'm setting it up the right way.
You are setting it up properly. Now, there had been some discussions prior to Christmas dinner, but but basically what happened was I announced to the whole family that I was graduating from law school in May, but I decided I wasn't going to become a lawyer. That the world had too many of those, and that I was going to become a distiller instead, which was a pretty bold statement considering I had never actually distilled anything before in my life. And honestly, even at that time, my knowledge of whiskey was pretty pitiful compared to where we are today. But that took my mom back. She thought she was about to be done with us, and both my brother and I were going to have on our own with 401ks and all the great stuff. But instead, we started a family business, which has been, I would say, a crazy, crazy ride over the last 8 years technically. So we did about 3 to 4 years of study on distilling before we really jumped in. But
yeah, and some of that study, I know you were out at Dry Fly with Don Poffenroth. Actually, thank you for connecting me with him. He was on a show that Alan Bishop and I did a couple weeks ago, and that turned out great.
Yeah, they just finished up a new distillery that looks absolutely gorgeous. If you're up in Spokane, guys.
Yeah. I'll just drive by there one day. Sure.
Yeah. Just a little jaunt.
So what else was involved in that preparation?
So obviously we went up to Dry Fly. We started getting every distilling book we could get our hands on at the time. And if you go back to 2011, that wasn't a whole lot of books out there. Some of them were written in the 50s regarding only column still distillation. There is some books that they used over in Scotland at Harriet Watt at the big distilling school out there. But a lot of, there wasn't a whole lot you could get our hands on. So it was a lot of brewing books, a lot of moonshine books, a lot of, getting into forums on the internet, trying to pick up as much information as we could. And then from there, just trying out different products from different craft distilleries that we saw. And we found ones that we liked. We kind of locked onto that and went and visited people. And next thing I knew, we were interning at a bunch of different places. Ended up doing classes through ADI. We got hooked up with Hubert Germain Raban for a while. And that's how I met Nancy Fraley, which has been a really, really important to just kind of what we do at Ironroot is really taking on that French tradition from them. And from there, we got to actually go over to France and distill over there. But another shout out to some friends that really took us under their wing early on was our friends down at Balcones in Waco. It was really, really important for us early on to understand what making whiskey in Texas looked like. What did the weather do to whiskey? When we were leaving Hubert and Nancy, the big question to us was, well, what is Texas whiskey and Texas brandy? What does it taste like? And when you go back to 2011, 2012, really the two main Texas made whiskeys that you could find on the market were Balcones Baby Blue and which again, that was difficult to find. And then Garrison Brothers. And if you've ever had those two whiskeys, they don't taste anything alike whatsoever. So, so the answer was, well, we don't really know what we're getting ourselves into as much as we can see what's happening with some of these other distilleries. And if we use some of these older techniques and start kind of molding them for our environment, we could see what we could do. And that was really kind of the journey that we set on over the last 8 years on that.
And this has been a family endeavor with not just you and your brother, but
well, there she is. Look at it. Yeah. I think those are my cowboy boots. I don't know if she got
those. and if I remember correctly, the still is Jim Bowie.
Yeah, his name's Jim Bowie. My brother has a very dark sense of humor, and so that was made by Vendome, obviously in Louisville. So the joke was that he came from Kentucky and hopefully he's going to die in Texas. So we tell that joke to every tour that we do, and sometimes it's dead silent, and I'm just to be like, is it too soon for the Alamo jokes, everybody? Is everybody not there yet? Right.
But I love it. I think it's great. But your mom's been involved with the business for a long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it started out when we first got everything operational. She was down 1 weekend a month to really help us out. And that quickly became 2 weekends a month. And then it was 2 weeks a month. And then she just never left. My poor father was left to hold down the fort and have a real job for a while the rest of us were enjoying our time making whiskey. So he just recently retired last October. So he's been at the distillery almost a year. So he's intern John, and we actually got we have one other employee, Ashley. Ashley, she does some really amazing things for us. Obviously, we've got Josh down in Austin holding down the fort down there for the time being, and we just brought in my cousin Alex. So we're slowly stealing family members from from stable jobs with 401ks and health insurance and all the fun stuff, and bring them in to make whiskey.
I was going to say, and yes, it was another ginger that they brought in.
Of course.
He's got a ginger beard, so it counts enough.
I was wondering if there was. My question was going to be is if Josh was actually related somehow, because there's some similarities there.
Yeah, I never thought I would say that I was lucky to be born a ginger, but it turned out it worked out for me okay.
So you
at
walked
the end of
in,
the day,
they
we're
saw
all
you,
related
you're
at some
hired,
point.
right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You don't have to be a ginger, but it's highly recommended.
It doesn't hurt.
Get your foot in the door, as it were.
Okay, so Drew, you've had a chance to taste some of this Harbinger. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So the nose to me was really surprising, only because a lot of the Texas whiskeys that I have tried are not heavy on the sweet aromatics, but right off the bat, I get this like big old brown sugar pecan pie filling kind of note.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the palate comes in with like a peach ring, kind of a sugary, fruity candy thing. And then back end, you get a lot of that strong oak influence, almost like, and I know we joke about almond skins on here, but that the bitter kind of outside of an almond when you're just kind of snacking on them. In a not at all unpleasant way, but just kind of, you can tell the presence of that wood. So it's really surprisingly complex and interesting to me. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I get a little bit of smoked meat, maybe like a maple glazed bacon. And if we want to go full on fat guy tasting note, we could do maple bacon donut maybe. That may be a bit of a stretch, but there's a lot of maturity to this, and again, I've put this in a decanter, makeshift decanter bottle, so I don't remember what the age was on the one that I actually poured in here, but I know when you guys won Whiskey of the Year, you were you had the Harbinger was at 27 months. Is that kind of where it's staying now?
So the modern ones are a little bit older than that. We're slowly creeping up age statement as we're shifting a few things at the distillery. But basically all the Harbingers in the last 2 years have been a blend of youngest barrels being about 32 months old and the oldest ones being just over 4. And again, sometimes that's one barrel that's on the older side. Sometimes it's 4, and the blends be anywhere between 6 to 12 barrels in a blend for Harbinger. It just depends.
Okay. Well, Drew, let's pour this Esoteric now. And one thing that I think is very interesting about what you guys do is how you differentiate yourselves from big whiskey, whether that's from whiskey made in Bardstown or whiskey made in Tullahoma or whiskey made in Lawrenceburg. Whiskey made in Denison is different. So what are you guys? How do you guys differentiate yourselves from the market?
I mean, I think it's going to first and foremost, it is always going to stem from that big still that you saw behind my mom. There is just a different nature of spirit that comes off of traditional pot stills. Again, the more plates and stuff you introduce, again, you're going to get a little bit different reaction to it. But the more old school pure pot still, you're going to see way more grain influence in what you're getting at the end of the day. Oiliness, obviously, especially with the angle off the top of our particular still. So you're going to get a ton of mouthfeel, a lot more of that grain character. Again, and using those heirloom corns really get magnified when you use pot stills versus what you're going to be getting off of a column. And beyond that, it really comes down to maturation. Obviously, Texas can be a very insane environment for aging spirits. It's very, very intense a lot of the year. But what we try to do is use a lot of the older French techniques, and that's a lot of that training from Hubert and Nancy, and from my time actually going over to France. Is how do you manage tannin extraction, and how do you allow the rest of the spirit to mature kind of in its proper rate without being overly dominated by tannin. And it's kind of a crazy thing to say in Texas. I mean, a lot of small distilleries will start out using smaller casks, and that's always been kind of the opposite of what we've done. We started out with 53s. In the last three and a half years now, we've been filling mostly 63-gallon barrels. And so we really do focus on much larger casks, the use of élevage, which is not just slow reduction. Slow reduction is a very important part of it, but it's really about tasting all the barrels as they're maturing and playing around with those barrels as they're aging. Because again, every barrel is a little bit different. Some are sweet and spicy. I mean, again, they're kind of like kids, and that's why the French use the term élevage for it, because it's really like raising kids, because not every barrel needs the same things to happen to it. Some, again, the spicier ones, the more tannic ones, we tend to add quite a bit of water to them during the course of their aging, and sometimes it means the entry proof might be 120. It might get up to 124. We might drop it down to 112 and let it come all the way back up to 120 before the end of the day. But it really it depends on what we're seeing. It's about managing, slowing down tannin when it needs to be, and allow a little bit more wood sugar and stuff to kind of help out blends. And really pulling some of the other flavors of barrels, I think, is really important. That in an environment like Texas, it's very easy to get color. It's very easy to get oak, especially on the tannin side. And it's about really allowing some of the other things from the spirit to really come through and mature. And I think that's really, for us and for my brother Jonathan, who is the head distiller, head blender at Ironroot, he really is taking heart to really developing a lot of these techniques to help us mature the spirit without it becoming, again, just a big bottle of tannins. So
now, Josh, you are the brand ambassador for Ironroot, correct?
That's right, sir.
Okay.
Indeed.
So from your perspective, how do you differentiate Ironroot from everything else that may be on the shelf?
There's echoing a lot of what Robert just said. The traditional copper pot still lends a certain viscosity and weight to the spirit, and retains a lot of that grain character from the purple corn, bloody butcher corn, all these heirloom corn varieties, and then the maturation and élevage techniques to kind of guide those barrels along, because of the heat, things move pretty quickly here when you're maturing whiskey. And as Robert said, you can extract a lot of oak influence really quickly, but we're trying to retain a lot of the wonderful flavors that come from those heirloom corn varieties and from the pot still without having them overwhelmed by the wood influence. I think the other thing that really goes into it is using there's a variety of cask types and a variety of different mash bills that are matured separately. Right. So if we're doing bloody butcher in one cask and purple corn and European oak over here. And so by the time you mature all these different cask types and all these different mash bills, you end up with sort of a palette to draw from when it comes time to blend a batch. So it's not just, hey, we crank out one set recipe all the time and just wait for it to be mature and then bottle it. We're actually drawing from different types of cask, different types of mash bills to create a flavor profile that's hopefully each one's better than the last one. So it's really that very hands-on, meticulous, barrel by barrel approach that really, I think, sets us apart from a lot of other distilleries that maybe do things in a little more uniform fashion, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. It helps out when you have ADD distillers to have the ability to bring everything back together.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Well, Josh, I got to ask about the guitars, man. I know we're on the whiskey. I don't know if we're ready to talk music yet. So, Kevin, cut me off if you need to. But what do we got back there? I see a couple of Fenders, and it's either a Martin or a Gibson, but I can't tell.
So the three electrics there are Sir guitars, so kind of takes on Fender style. Got a funky Jazzmaster type, and then a semi-hollow Telecaster, and kind of a straight-up Stratocaster type there. And the acoustic there is actually a Taylor. Can't see the headstock off the
Taylor. Okay.
Yeah, kind of a little bit of a take on a Gibson J45 style.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been
Right on. So what do you play like traditionally when you're playing? What kind of music are you gonna put on?
Typically, I'm more of a rock and blues guy than anything else. I like a huge range of music from classic 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up to stuff that's brand new today. Obviously, when you guys were doing the Black Keys episode, I just kept hearing references to all these bands and then some opinions on the songs, and I was like, I'm gonna like these guys, right? we tend to have some of the same opinions on these things, I think. So.
Yeah, you mentioned that you listened to the show, but you didn't say that you liked it or not. And I was afraid to ask, so I just kind of let that pass.
No, I actually, when you guys were talking about your preference, the different albums in the Black Keys show, and then your preferences, and maybe things that you didn't prefer on certain albums, I found my opinion to be pretty much in line with what you guys were saying.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So. In looking at the whiskey aspect of this, and we're talking about the esoteric. So, Robert or Josh, one of you guys, describe for us what's different about esoteric.
So, esoterics, generally, you can kind of sum it up as being a blend of bourbon and corn whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's why if you had the bottle in front of you, it would be labeled American whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Something that maybe doesn't have quite as much oak to it as the Harbinger. There you go. Robert's got one there. A little bit softer, slightly lower proof, of course, also than the Harbinger, but still brings a lot of the heirloom corn varieties. And that's something I think also is really interesting with us is we have several different corn whiskeys, and you're going to try the kind of the most fun and interesting, unique one in Icarus here in a bit. But preserving those flavors of the Bloody Butcher corn and purple corn and stuff like that to really come through in a product like Esoteric is something that creates a really distinct style of whiskey, I think. So it's familiar enough if somebody's a fan of bourbon and even traditional Kentucky style bourbon, it's close enough to that, but it's really distinct, being that it comes from the heirloom corns and the pot still and using the French maturation techniques.
Is there a particular varietal of corn that's in the esoteric, or is that a blend of different, or how does that, or is that one of those things I can't tell you, or if I did, I'd have to shoot you?
Definitely gonna have to kill you, but no, esoteric. So we have obviously we experiment quite a bit. I mean, we've distilled over 30 different species of corn in the last 8 years. And so we've got two different outlets for that. One, we have the A series from Harbinger. So the very first release of the Harbingers every year is going to be some sort of an experimental corn, but we'll still kind of, it's going to be, have that sort of expression with kind of the base of a traditional Harbinger, so that they're kind of unique versions of Harbinger, that A series. Esoteric, on the other hand, is where we get a little bit more wild. It's Esoteric is actually kind of a bastardized Solera, to be very, very frank about it. So what we'll do is we take a lot of our experiments, especially the ones we don't feel are really suitable for blending in with some of the Harbinger ones, and those will be kind of slated towards Esoteric. And so every time we release it, it's a different product. It really is. So, I mean, I don't know which batch that you guys have.
It doesn't say.
No, it doesn't say.
Yeah.
Well, if it was a 2018, that was the very first one that we did, and that had actually was a wheated bourbon with yellow corn, and then also we had a little bit of green Oaxacan corn that was in it. The second batch that we released was a much older one. So what we did is we bottled half of it. The rest of it that we blended got put back in cask and kept maturing. 2 years later, we pulled it back out of barrel, blended more experiments into it, bottled half of it. We added in on the second, which is more than likely probably the one you have, but I don't know without actually looking at the bottle. We added in one that had purple prairie barley, added in a corn whiskey that was what was it? What was the other corn? It wasn't a blue corn. It had magic manna in it. That was the other other corn that was in that one. And so we added in some of those barrels into the blend. Half of it got bottled, half of it got put back. And we're getting ready to release the third batch of Esoteric here in a couple weeks. Now, Esoteric is going to start becoming a little bit more of a regular product from us. I'm pretty excited about it now that we've got a really wonderful base of some of the whiskey in it is, over 4 or 5 years old. So it's really rich. It's one of the few lower proof products that we do as well, because it's always at 97. But yeah, it's kind of just a fun way to blend in some of these experimental whiskeys that we've created over the years that we don't do as single barrels, but this is where they go. And as Josh said, some of them are corn whiskeys, some of them are bourbons. There's a chance that, in the warehouse, we have wheat whiskey, we have rye whiskeys, we've got all sorts of different stuff that who knows. There's single malts, there's Irish style whiskey. So who knows what all will get blended into it by the time we're, who knows? Again, every year or every time we do it, it'll be a little bit different. But.
Sure. So, Drew, you had a chance to try this Esoteric. Weigh in on this thing.
Okay, so I was thinking through this, and this is kind of tough to get a grasp on, but it's very transitional and kind of evolutionary as you go through. There's kind of distinct processes or phases. So it comes in, and I get a lot of like meringue, kind of just caramelized egg white kind of thing, but with sugar, obviously. Back end has a little bit of like a graham cracker thing going on. And then towards the finish, it lightens up, and that is very rare for me. I don't typically get a lot of lighter things on the back end, but a lot of floral notes, kind of tulip or daisy, kind of brighter. And I don't know if that's due to the corn varietals you were talking about, or a yeast strain, or what that's about. But very rarely is fermentation flavors or what I consider fermentation-based flavors come through on the finish, and that was really surprising to me with that one. So, very intrigued.
Is there any malted grain
in the second one? It wasn't malt, but there was barley in it.
Okay.
We've got the 97 proof version, or at least that's what I have. Is that?
Yeah. Each one it's always at 97.
I think this is the
97.
second.
Okay.
I think this is the second one.
If it's the second one.
Yeah.
So if second one, you do have some malt in that one. There was some caramel malted wheat, but it was a malted wheat, not a malted barley.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is very interesting and almost like a sunflower note on it.
Yeah, it has a lot of cool florals that have really kind of developed throughout it, which has been a lot of fun. Especially with the purple prairie barley tended to be very floral overall.
Now, do you get that note, those floral notes a lot in just any of the corn whiskeys that you do?
Yeah, some of the purple corn whiskeys can get particularly floral at times, especially individual casks. We've done some bottlings of purple corn whiskey that are incredibly floral, like violet.
Wow.
Type of floral notes. Yeah, those are always really fun.
What was Jonathan's nickname for that one barrel? It was Violet Beauregard, I think, because he thought it was violet and blueberry was the notes he was getting off of it. So
nice.
Yeah. You guys are really keying in on some of the what I consider to be sort of hallmark notes of our whiskey. You said graham cracker, Drew, meringue with a caramelized sugar. I always kind of think creme brulee with that. Some of the fruitier and floral notes, as well as kind of some almond and blueberry can get in there at times. So yeah, it's really great to see you guys kind of picking up on that, having it for the first time.
It always makes me feel less crazy when other people get the same things we do.
Now, do y'all still have some of the sample that I sent y'all when I was on the show?
Oh yeah, you sent them some tri-barrel, didn't you?
I did. I sent them the winter.
I don't think mine survived the night.
No, it didn't make it. But when Shannon was a guest on the show, she was talking about Texas whiskey, and she sent us some blind samples. And Shannon, do you remember what you said that keyed it on that it had to be Ironroot?
Oh, y'all, one of y'all was talking about you were getting some cognac or Armagnac off of
Yeah.
it. Like, well, that should give it away right there.
Yeah, and it did. It did. And that was very, very interesting. That was very, very. I mean, it's very unique. Not like anything else that I've had, other than an Armagnac or something.
Yeah, that tends to be our favorite barrels at the distillery that start bringing in some what I like to call the rancio notes that you see sometimes in Armagnac, and typically that's going to be the Slovenian oak barrels that we have. We're going to bring quite a bit of that to it, and so that it's always a special barrel for us when we get that, because you get the right fermentation notes in there that mix with the right cask, and you get some really wonderful results from that. And sometimes it can get a little bit crazier. We've had one go almost blue cheesy on us, which was real funky and real fun. But which again it's one of those things that some of us love it, and I know that it's not going to be everybody's thing. But man, when you get some really funky things, sometimes those are my favorite.
Wow. Well, obviously, you guys are continue to grow and are putting more and more barrels down. How difficult is it to continue that élevage practice with more and more barrels?
It's significantly more difficult. I mean, just staying on top of barrels, especially in dynamic environments, it's probably one of the most difficult things that we have to consciously set aside time to go back there, not only to evaluate barrels, but then to go back and make the changes once you see them. And so that's been over the last kind of 6 to 9 months has been our big move, especially as we get ready to break ground on a new warehouse, knowing we're going to need a lot more time back there. And so that's why my cousin came in a little bit earlier than even what we were looking at originally, to start working on some of the training for distilling. It's why hopefully Josh will be moving up to Denison in the not too distant future here. So we're going to be doing, the team is definitely getting a little bit bigger, a little bit more robust on not only the tasting team, but also on the production side team. So it takes a little bit more pressure off Jonathan. We can focus a lot on, again, that back end side, because it is I would say it's also very draining to taste that many barrels, that many days in a week. It can take a lot out of you.
Right.
Or your tongue, at least. So.
Because with you guys, it's just not, well, we've got it fermented and distilled and we've put it in a barrel now, we'll forget about it for however long. You're sampling these all along the way and making adjustments, either adding water or determining, okay, this is going to be something that we'll use for Harbinger. This will be something that we'll use for a different product, right?
Oh yeah,
that's exactly right.
Because we'll put blends together generally 6 months to 9 months ahead of time. And that's, again, part of that slow reduction on the back end of élevage is you have to have the time to do that. But that's, again, prepping blends and doing that and creating those master blends and then slightly altering them during the course of their proofing down process has been, it's, again, especially as we grow and you've got more lines of product that you're putting out. And again, I think this last year has been, hey, Jonathan, can you handle this? And then, toss it on anyway and hope it works out for him. So it's been, I think it's been one of us learning as we grow, as we get to a little bit larger distillery, how do we manage it and maintain the quality and maintain exactly what we're doing? And that's been, for me, kind of one of the most fun part about this year is, one, bringing in new people and introducing them to them, but also I've had more time to go back into the warehouse and spend more time back there, which has been, rather than doing, filing paperwork with TTB and all that stuff. So that's been a lot more fun for me here this last year too. So I don't know, I feel like having more more hands on the barrels has been it's what brings us a lot of joy. I think for me, it's the most fun part of the process is really watching those barrels grow up. And, we've been watching, especially lately, the brandies. Again, our oldest brandies are getting close to running on to 8 years old now.
Wow.
And really getting excited for what we're going to be doing with those guys here in the not too distant future. So I don't know. I feel like the kids are finally almost grown up at some level right now. So I know. It's been a really fun year for the both of us, for sure.
Good.
It's awesome.
Well, I want to. We're going to transition to the music stuff here in just a second, but I do have a couple more questions on the distillery side of things, and that's what are your plans for future growth, and selfishly, what are your plans for expanded distribution? Because because you live in a state that is, well, very draconian in its policies regarding shipping, and that for the rest of the world is a bad thing. Now, if you live in Texas, like Shannon when she's actually at home, that's okay. But for the rest of us, the only complaint I ever have about Ironroot is I can't get it.
It's especially in the last couple of years, is the popularity for us has really grown. It's been an adventure because we set out a lot of our initial distribution agreements and stuff like that before all that kind of happened, and now I feel like every time we supply a location with whiskey, it's kind of like throwing like a whiskey in a black hole almost. We put it out and it disappears, which
Right.
On the sales side is super, super great. It makes my mom very happy with us. But it's getting whiskey to people has been kind of the biggest thing we've been looking at. And we didn't really know what we were going to do when COVID hit and what the world was going to look like. So we had some things we were starting to do and then had to back off and then realized that was the exact wrong thing to do and to re-expand. So we, in the last, I guess, year and a half, what we've done, we've added in an actual bottling line, which an automated bottling line they're not always as automated as you think they're going to be, because it takes 7 of us to run a bottling line, which means that have volunteers.
A lot of moving parts.
It is significantly faster bottling, but that's been a huge weight because we can actually get all the bottling done now. So that went into our old kind of cocktail lounge that we had at the distillery. So we built a new one. And as soon as we had the shell of it built, we realized that we no longer had any glass storage because we started just shoving barrels wherever they can fit in the distillery. So the new cocktail lounge is actually full of glass at the moment. We've got 5 containers outside that are holding some cardboard stuff. Some are actually holding barrels. And then we've got, so we've been just figuring out how do we get enough money to actually build a warehouse. And we finally have got that kind of figured out. And so supposedly by October, we should be under construction of we've got 2 new buildings we're going to be putting on our property, about an extra 14,000 square foot of space. And it's mostly barrel storage. Because fortunately, when we started out, we actually built the production side can way outscale what our storage capacity is. Thank goodness. So it's going to be fun because next year Jonathan's going to be able to go kind of full force with the distilling rather than holding back. So hopefully we'll be. The answer is it's going to be 2-3 years before the increased production from last year finally will start coming. So we'll be in about 3 years, we'll be really starting to hit the market pretty well in a number of states at least.
Great.
So
great. Now, in terms of your rick houses or your storage houses, those are the what you currently have. Is it climate controlled?
No, nothing we have is climate controlled. Now, our main warehouse is insulated, and that's not going to change. So we're going to have a couple different types of rick houses on site. Some that are going to be what I call softer maturation, and some more intense maturation, depending on what the product is and kind of where it is in its life cycle. So this is where we get to start having a lot of fun with some of the techniques of, all right, during this part of the life cycle, this is where we want the barrels. And once they get through that, then we're going to move them over to a different section and start playing around with that. So Josh, get good at driving forklifts is all I can say.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up side A of the show and transition into side B. But before we do that, we want to tell you about the Alan Bishop experience. Now, Robert, I believe you know Alan.
Oh yeah, for many, many years.
Yeah. And Bo Cumberland, who is on to the right of Alan, there is a documentary filmmaker. And so Bo has pulled together hours and hours and hours of nonsensical footage and somehow compile that into a documentary that is called the Alan Bishop Experience. So that will be coming out to the world soon. So be on the lookout for that. Brace yourself, because it's going to be. I've seen the trailers. I've not seen anything other than that, and it is nonstop nonsense. But I'm confident in Bo's ability to pull it into something that is going to be very enlightening and entertaining all at the same time. So be on the lookout for that. So as we're starting side B, we're going to talk about music. Drew, go ahead and take a pour of that Icarus if you haven't already.
Yeah, I've got it, man.
All right, and we'll start tasting on that as we start talking about music. So, on the first thing we want to ask both Robert and Josh, your first concert. Do you remember what that was?
Oh yeah.
Yep, I do.
Josh,
indeed.
what was it?
So, geez, I was probably 10-ish years old, and my brother took me to see the Spin Doctors and Screaming Trees sometime in the 90s. And that was back in the day, they would just put gigantic guitar amps and bass amps on stage and turn those things up to 11 and let it rip, right? They don't do that so much anymore. And it's kind of a good thing. You can hear everything better, and you don't lose your hearing for the entire next day. But I remember being absolutely blown away by that just visceral experience of super loud amplifiers hitting you in the chest, as a little 10-year-old ginger kid. But yeah, I was hooked from that point on, right?
Yeah.
So he started me down the path of going to hundreds and hundreds of shows thereafter.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. How about yourself,
absolutely.
Robert?
I owe it all to my brother. So
I came to concerts at a much later point in my life than Josh did. My first concert was actually my freshman year of college, and that's when all my friends and I went down to Austin City Limits in 2005. That was my very first concert. So there was a ton of bands. I mean, it was like the Allman Brothers, Blues Traveler. I think Steve Earle was there, Oasis, which was a ridiculous show of the brothers fighting on stage, which is always it was an experience to say the least. The Decemberists were there, Wilco. I think Coldplay was actually the big headliner that year, which I'm not the biggest Coldplay fan, but they are very good live. I really enjoyed they sent all sorts of stuff into the crowd. It was pretty crazy. Arcade Fire, I think Franz Ferdinand. Trying to see what else was there. I mean, it was ACL is always crazy. Yeah. So it was a really fun concert.
Yeah. I'm not a big Coldplay fan myself, but I did get to see them live. They opened for U2 several years ago. And I thought, well, I'm not gonna. This is gonna be terrible, but they were really good.
They're very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Them and the Flaming Lips are really good stage people.
Yeah.
Talk about a hell of a show right
Flaming
there.
Lips
Yeah.
put on a hell of a live show. It was a
Yeah,
great
that's for
show.
sure.
So, in terms of first albums, what was your first album, Robert?
Oh man, I
And-
believe my first album, which my first CD that I ever got was the Space Jam soundtrack. I believe was my very first one to
Alright.
get. So, for actual like band album though, I think it was Green Day Dookie, if my memory serves correct.
Yeah. I think we would get along quite well, Robert.
Josh, how about yourself? First album, do you remember?
Yeah, first album. I guess that I bought with my own money was probably the soundtrack to the movie The Crow. It had all the weird like David Bowie and Nine Inch Nails, and then all the weird soundscape type stuff on it as well. But in terms of an individual band, I think maybe there was a band, and they're still around, but there was a band in the mid '90s called the Dandy Warhols out of Seattle. And I remember going to there was a music store in Brighton, Michigan, where I lived at the time, called Cannibals Music, and they had their logo. The C in Cannibals was like a CD with a bite taken out of it. And walked through this music store, had no idea what I'm even looking for, and I thought the Dandy Warhols was kind of a clever, cool name, so I just bought it blind and ended up really liking that album. But yeah, I think that was the first time I went to a music store by myself and picked something out, bought it with my own money.
Yeah, that the soundtrack to The Crow is very underrated, and I think had Stone Temple Pilots on there and The Cure,
right.
Rage Against the Machine. So yeah, that's some good stuff. That's some really good stuff. So at the distillery, do you guys have music playing either in around the still? Do you have music playing in the public areas or anything like that?
We used to have. I mean, we don't a lot, just because there's not a really good sound system at the distillery. We usually see Jonathan running around with his earphones in, so he's usually rocking out to something. But in the public areas, we don't. My parents, I don't know, for whatever reason, they were never big like music in the background people. Like even I remember like riding in cars, and most of the time it was like pure silence for the most part. Like, except for whenever we went to the beach, and we always they had this really weird tape that they would play that had like the Alvin and Chipmunks on it. It had like Purple People Eater on it. It had just like weird, like there was a Star Trek spoof song that was on it. I don't know. It was this weird eclectic collection of music. And also, if you've ever listened to Gary P. Nunn, Shannon, you may have heard Gary P. Nunn, but that was on there as well. But yeah, so they were never really big. Like we always I mean, my brother and I grew up playing like classical piano. And so, but we never really listened to a bunch of music, but whenever Jonathan's alone at the distillery, that's when the music's rocking by itself. When mom's around, because she usually comes out and tells us kids to turn it down. So just trying to do stuff. But yeah, no, that's usually earphones in and people listening to music rather than it being outwardly played.
Okay, but in classical piano though, that's
both my brother and I played piano for many years. Jonathan, he's one of those people that can listen to a song and then play it. I never picked up that sort of ear training skill. I can read music and I can play, but I could never listen and just start playing. So Josh, though, that's the whenever we have like family get-togethers or stuff like that, we usually bring Josh out and someone hands him a guitar, or he'll be playing and we'll be upstairs at his place playing, and that's usually more when we just kind of sit around and Josh plays and jams and we just kind of chat, drink whiskey. It's more of the music that gets done at Ironroot more than anything else.
That's true. It's usually the after hours hangouts that somebody starts turning on some music or busting out a guitar or something like that. I find though, like it's kind of maybe you guys find this to be the same. It's interesting if you're in totally quiet environment, conversation feels more difficult and people are more hesitant to speak. But the second that you have some background music playing, conversation starts coming out of people more easily, right? So that's something I love to have. Like whenever Robert and Alex were down for the Texas Whiskey Festival and we come back to the house after, the first thing I do is turn on music and everybody just starts talking and having a good time. So yeah,
a lot of times around the still, we don't have a lot of music playing because we're used to the kind of ambient noise of the still and the chiller and the boiler, because our boiler likes to be very finicky. And so, so the moment that it kicks off, that sound goes away. It just, if you're used to it, it makes you very uncomfortable when that sound is gone. And so we usually know that we need to go kick the boiler back on. So I'd say that's probably the main reasons we don't have a lot of music just rocking out in the distillery, is for that more than anything else. I think if the boiler and chiller were more stable, then we probably would have more music playing.
So what do you listen to now? So if we hop in your car and we're riding somewhere, going to dinner, what would we hear on your car radio?
I probably have the weirdest mix of music that plays, but I mean,
I can confirm that.
Yeah, it'll jump from every genre to things I was listening to back in, 2004 to today. But I mean, it's a mix of kind of classic rock. I mean, I think one of my favorite classes in college was actually rock and roll history, that took you from Muddy Waters all the way to, I think we ended with Pink Floyd was probably, I think, was the last one that we covered in class. But I mean, I love a lot of different genres of music. I listen to everything from like old school, like Patti Loveless and Trampled by Turtles to Queen and Pat Green and AC/DC, and Flogging Molly is a lot. I mean, I think I've got like 4 or 5 records of theirs. Old Crow Medicine Show, a lot of Johnny Cash. Credence. I mean, if we get to like my guilty pleasures, you get to like Offspring and stuff like that from the 90s. That's like I don't know. Just it's a lot of weird stuff. Bob Schneider is kind of a Texas Austin artist that does some fun stuff. I don't know. But just weird eclectic music. My wife makes fun of me a lot because she grew up with, her father was really big into classic rock, and so she knows more about Led Zeppelin than like she can just start singing songs. I'm like, I have never even heard this Led Zeppelin song, and she gives me a very hard time about it.
We'll have to have her on the show sometime too, then.
Yeah, I know.
Josh, how about yourself? What's playing on your stereo when you're driving down the street?
Yeah, heavy rotation for me right now has been the new Black Keys album, and as we were talking about earlier, a lot of Jason Isbell, Joe Bonamassa has been in heavy rotation for me recently. The new Spoon record is fantastic, and I don't know, all sorts of interesting other stuff. Radiohead I listen to sometimes, Sturgill Simpson. Kind of trying to think what's been in my recent playlist lately. Rival Sons seems like something that might be up you guys' alley. Yeah, those guys rock. And then, always classic rock stuff from the Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, to kind of weirder, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, all of the kind of British rock stuff. You guys mentioned Larkin Poe on the Black Keys show. Yeah, I've got their album. I know they have a new one coming out, right?
Yep.
They're fantastic.
This fall, I think. Yeah.
I mean, I like a wide range of stuff, but if it's kind of rootsy guitar centric, that's kind of home for me. One form or another, whether it be blues or more of a Americana, type thing, then I dig that quite a bit.
Yeah, I was curious. I know we talked a little bit about music at the distillery and all those kind of things, but you guys have such a distinctive Texan identity. Is there one Texas artist that you guys, vibe to with your whiskey? If you had to compare your whiskey to one musical artist, we could make that connection. Is it, somebody that moved there, like, Willie Nelson? Is it a Gary Clark Jr.? Is it ZZ Top? Where does that fall for you guys?
That is a great question,
Oh
man.
boy.
Yeah, this was like I thought a trick question when they asked me this question. I was like, how do you person?
These are just the things Kevin and I ponder when we're drinking on his back porch, listening to music. So you're just participating in that conversation.
So I actually made my choice, and then they questioned my choice. So I was like, well, he's pretty too, but
Maybe Gary Clark's kind of a good comparison or a good pairing, if you will.
You mean Josh, you wouldn't go with Bowling for Soup? You wouldn't go with
Bowling for Soup? No. Gary Clark has such kind of classic influences, and it's obvious in a way what he's doing, but it's a mix of straight up blues and rock and roll, kind of Jimi Hendrix type of a vibe there. But then there's also soul and R&B mixed in there as well, and so he's kind of a classic feeling mashup of a few different musical styles, but kind of brings that all together into something that's uniquely Gary Clark. And so that's why I think it would probably be a great comparison to Ironroot, because it's very rooted in tradition, but when it comes together, it's its own thing unto itself.
Yeah, I love that. You guys need to try to get a bottle of your stuff in his hand, see if you can make a little something happen.
Oh no, I need to try and make that happen.
Yeah. So I also think Texas, and I think barbecue. I'm drinking this Likarish right now, and I mean, if you gave me a plate of burnt ends right now, I couldn't be happier. So
That's right.
what is y'all's relationship? Exactly. What's y'all's relationship with the food scene? I know, Josh, you're in Austin. Obviously, Benson's a little ways away, but Texas known for barbecue. What do you guys do with that?
So I think that one of the things about Jonathan and we've always been very food centric. Jonathan, I feel like he was born at the grill almost a little bit. Between grilling, barbecuing, he's always trying to come up with different steak sauces, and again, he's always perfecting his steak cooking techniques. And he's got, I don't know, Josh, how many grills does he have? I think he's got 3 or 4 different grills that he likes for different points in time. And this is how we cook. This is where I've got the different charcoal where I can separate it off in different points.
Yeah, he's got a couple at the distillery and then a couple more at his house, I think.
Yeah, that's I think food barbecue culture is obviously very big, very huge influence in Texas, and just melding of flavors. And I think that's the one thing I really like about barbecue too, is that it's got it's such Americana, but it also has heritage that's built into food cultures that came from other places. And I think it's that kind of the adoption, or how we adopted a lot of those techniques over the years in the United States. And again, you see it, even the different parts of the country, how barbecue is interpreted and comes together can be very different. I mean, from our local area that I wasn't even aware of until recently, that they have some sort of, it's like a brown gravy sauce they do in North Texas. And I was like, I'd never even heard of it before. And it's been, really, really quite unique. But I think that's Jonathan and I, as far as building palate wise, was really built upon, again, barbecue. And I mean, my parents had this giant smoker at the house that Jonathan and I, that's what we did for fun during the summers, is that we would play around with barbecuing. And then what I loved about it is there was it was a huge vertical smoker. And so you could play around with different meats on different levels, and they would just drip onto each other, and how they would mix, and you'd have the fat kind of influence the flavor of the meats under it, which was fun to play with. And we had our own personal opinions of which way was the best, but it's always a little fight amongst the family.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a universal thread, right, for people that are into whiskey and into spirits in general. I mean, it's so much about flavor and rooted in history and tradition, and there's such a story behind all of it that I find that a lot of folks that are really into their spirits, especially people that are willing to try kind of unique, different, interesting stuff like what we make at Ironroot, they tend to also like to cook, or at least, eat different types of cuisines and stuff like that. I have a little more adventuresome palate, which is always something I really relate to. But I will tell you, Rob's a great cook. I like to cook, but Jonathan Jonathan is the only person that I have seen on multiple occasions just say, okay, I'm going to go get my welding torch, or I'm going to go get this giant cast iron wok, or, he comes up with the most crazy, interest, and always pulls it off, always makes amazing food. But he's so inventive and creative in the way he goes about it. It's more so than any of the rest of us, I think.
We have a very close relationship with one of our local butcher shops that they come every other month or so, and they bring us a bunch of giant bone-in ribeyes and big cowboy steaks and stuff like that. So Jonathan, he loves getting giant hunks of meat and playing around with them. In fact, when we had the big freeze here in Texas that kind of shut everything down in the state for a week, Jonathan lost power, so he came down to my house and he pulled his meat out of the freezer, and I don't have as much freezer space as he did. So we, for 4 days, ate different types of steak that he had brought down. And so we drank, ate steak, played with the kids, and we were very, very fortunate during the freeze because I didn't lose power all that much at my house. So we had a little family powwow and basically cooked for 4 days, which was a really, really nice adventure for us. So
that's one way to make it through that. That
yeah,
was a pretty.
it's not the worst way to go about it.
Yeah, not everybody had that that kind of option available to them, but congratulations on that. So, Drew, thoughts on the Icarus?
Yeah, I know.
Hang on just a second. Let me stop you there because I want Robert and Josh to describe what the Icarus is.
Sure.
first.
Yeah. So Icarus, corn whiskey, purple corn whiskey, and it was kind of this idea. We make a corn whiskey every year called Hubris, and so that's purple corn whiskey in European oak casks. Okay, and then what if we treated corn whiskey like it was a Scotch? Okay, so we take that purple corn whiskey and take part of it and finish it in a port wine cask, and then another part of it finished in a peated quarter cask from Islay over in Scotland. So you get, the fruity, almost floral, sweet corn whiskey, then that kind of mid palate of the winey, the port wine notes, and then it finishes with the little hint of peat smoke. So it's a really interesting, creative. I've never had another whiskey like it. In fact, the first time I ever went to the distillery, thanks to Robert, we sat there and tried everything, and Icarus was the one thing where I said, I need a bottle of that today. So that's what you're tasting there, but it's, I've just never had another whiskey like it. What do you guys think?
Yeah. It's delicious. Hearing you state that description, I feel like I was all around it, but not exactly what you said. So I was thinking smoked meat, a little bit of mesquite, not necessarily peat, but just definitely some smoke presence. And then I was thinking grape jelly. I don't know if you guys ever grew up going to church potlucks where you pour a bottle of barbecue sauce and a bottle of grape jelly in the crock pot. It's giving me that. And so, but the wine and the peat cask make total sense to me. That's really, really complex. Super interesting.
Yeah, there's some like fruity notes, like plum, like some really dark red fruit notes in there, and then that nice smoke. It's not overpowering like some smoke can be. It's very deftly handled, I think.
And that's always kind of the trick with Icarus. If you try straight from the peated cask only, it's much more powerful, right? So it's really getting that blend proportion correct. So there's some kind of smoke there. It may not even register as peat to you unless you're thinking about it. It may register as maybe a barbecue type of wood smoke or something. But to have that be present but not too much is really kind of the key to it, I think.
Maybe even a little like dark chocolate on the finish.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This one, I think my brother, going off your question of relating some of the music to our whiskeys, for this one, I think it'd be kind of Townes Van Zandt. I think would be kind of more of what Jonathan's inspiration for this one would be.
Love it.
I like that.
So, Josh, do you play? Other than at the distillery, do you play out at clubs or anything?
Bars or anything like that? No, not in a very long time. So I've for the last 15 years or so, I've had a pretty intense, busy job, and guitar was always something. I mean, since I was 14, 15 years old, I've had a passion for it, and so I've held on to that. But it kind of became this, after work for an hour or 2 or 3, depending on what kind of day I had. Play guitar after work, and I tend to play at least a little bit most days. But it's kind of a hobby thing for me. Although I'd like to do more with it, maybe do some recording and maybe play out in bars and stuff like that. Get back to doing that. I do miss. I've gotten out on occasion to play music with other people, but which is always a magical experience and there's such connection to it and all that. And I really miss that. Just haven't been really able to make it happen on a consistent basis for quite a while. So I'm looking to get back into that if I can. Yeah.
Good.
He does play very well. I've heard videos on like Facebook and stuff.
Thanks, Shannon.
Oh goodness!
I forgot we did that to you.
Yeah, that's right. The Texas Whiskey Festival that comes through every year by our friend Jake Clements. The distilleries that have been a part of it every single year, which is it was year 5 this year. Yeah. So he gave each distillery that's been with him from the beginning kind of a souvenir guitar he got a vinyl sticker on the top with sort of the Ironroot logo in our case as the focus of it, and the Texas Whiskey Festival logo, and so that's hanging up in the distillery is sort of a cool award from one of our favorite events every year. But we got to play it a little bit back at the house after the award ceremony.
That's awesome.
We would have put it there, but it needed some tuning before we could play.
It did.
Well, we'll kind of start wrapping things up here. We've kept you guys for a while now, and we want to make sure we respect your time. But Robert, I know that I believe it was this weekend you guys had a special release. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was actually Icarus came out this weekend. So there's going to be some hitting stores in Texas here in the next few weeks. So be on the lookout for that. But it went every year that it seems to go sell out faster. In fact, we used to have it used to stick around for 3 or 4 months when we released it because peat's not really everyone's jam. I mean, as we all know in the whiskey industry, but it just the popularity of that whiskey, it grows and grows and grows every single year. So I hope my mom, I wasn't there yesterday, so I hope my mom saved me a bottle.
But I believe you guys have the ability to sign up for these releases, correct?
Yeah. So what we started doing, which now Icarus wasn't done this way, and I guess it has to be for next year now, is that people actually have to sign and go on our website. You can sign up for our newsletter, at which point you can then you get kind of monthly or bi-monthly newsletters that'll let you know when new releases are coming out. And for limited stuff, what we do is 75% of the release is put into a lottery for people to sign up online, because we'll hold bottles for 6 months. So that way people can buy a couple of those and then again, come to the distillery and pick them up. But we try to do that so people from kind of outside the area can get bottles too, that you don't necessarily have to be from Denison and show up on the day of the release to get the bottle. I like to spread it around as best I can, at least. Yeah. So typically that's how we do most of our kind of limited, or anything that's under 300 bottles. That's how we'll do. We're 500 bottles now, but.
Well, tell everybody where they can find you, Robert, or Ironroot on social media, please.
So social media, it's just going to be on Facebook, Ironroot. Just type in Ironroot and you'll find us. On Instagram, I believe it's at Ironroot Republic. Same thing with Twitter, although we don't do a ton on Twitter. But Instagram and Facebook are going to be the best ones to find us.
Josh, how about you? What are your accounts?
Yeah, so mostly on just Instagram. I'm at Josh Golladay. And you can probably type in Ironroot and find that as well pretty easily. So that tends to be most of what I post. It may be guitar videos or husky pictures if it's not whiskey. So
Singing husky videos.
Singing husky videos.
Yeah, that's right.
He likes the auto-tuned huskies.
That's awesome. All right. Shannon, where can people find you?
Hey, on Instagram, WTF, Whiskey Trouble Food. Also, Poorly Educated, POURLY.
Awesome. And Drew?
Yep. You can find me at drew.crawley63 on Instagram. That's primarily for music. And then you can find me at drewcrawley63 on Twitter and Drew Crawley on Facebook if you want me being rude to people on Twitter. That's typically what I use that for. So, yeah, follow at your own risk.
Oh, man. That's true. Hey, Bourbon Turntable. You can find us about anywhere. YouTube. You can watch the show on YouTube. You can listen to the show on your favorite podcast platform, as long as it's Apple, Spotify, or Google. We are also on Facebook and also on Twitter, although we do not do a whole lot on Twitter either, because we're nice. We're nice people, so we don't do a whole lot on Twitter. Unlike Drew's account, it's pretty nasty there. So anyway, hey, our next show that we've got coming up is going to be a fun one. I think we're going to be talking about
summertime music and summertime pours. So Kevin and myself, and maybe a special guest, maybe not sure yet, but we're going to be chatting through what our favorite things to pour either by the pool or at the lake or at a game are, and then what are some of those songs that put us in the summer mood.
Yeah, because it's almost summer. So I know it probably feels like it in Texas already.
In Texas, it already is summer.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be in the hundreds next week.
Well, we'll have some music suggestions for you guys to listen to when that show comes out. So be sure to tune in for that. So until next time, I want to first thank Robert and Josh for joining us. Man, we really enjoyed having you. It's always great to catch up and hear about what's going on at Ironroot, because it's always fantastic stuff. And to hear some of your music background and history, that was a lot of fun as well. So hope you guys had a good time.
Absolutely. Thanks so
Always
much for
do,
having
Kevin.
me.
Always do.
Yeah. All right.
Come and visit.
So I was planning to do that, and then we had the COVID thing, and so that kind of shut that down. But I will definitely be down there before too long. And I'm going to try to get Shannon to help me locate a few bottles of Ironroot that I can't get here. And I'm looking forward to you guys making Josh's job harder by having a wider distribution and more stuff to put on the shelves. So we'll as soon as that happens, we'll definitely have. Even before, if you want to, come on up and we'll have a good time here. Showing you around and take you to a show that Drew's doing or something. But anything we can do to help you guys out, we're always here for you, because we
don't threaten me with a good time.
Go, we will. We absolutely will. But we really appreciate what you guys do. You're doing it the right way, and it's very unique. It's something that people can really sink their teeth into and enjoy. So we have a lot of respect for that. So congratulations on all of your success. And I know that there's a lot more headed your way.
Thanks for that.
Oh,
absolutely. All right. So till next time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Love. And free bird.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.